This is the Ramana Maharshi Satsang. I'm reading from the Ashtavakra Gita. Listen, reflect, and deeply meditate. Know yourself. Welcome. I'm Richard Clarke. I'm not a guru or a teacher. Ramana's teaching is deep and profound, and I want to share it. I'm reading from and commenting on the Ashtavakra Gita. Ramana is said to exemplify this Gita. Today is chapter 18, verses 9 through 12. And in this chapter, Ashtavakra is speaking of peace, the peace of a sage. Knowing for certain that all is self, the sage has no trace of thought such as I am this or I am not that. The yogi who finds stillness is neither distracted nor focused. He knows neither pleasure nor pain. Ignorance dispelled, he is free of knowing. Heaven or poverty, gain or loss, society or solitude, to the yogi, free of conditioning, there is no difference. Religious merit, sensory pleasure, worldly prosperity, discrimination between this and that. These have no significance to the yogi, free of opposites, such as I do this and this I do not. So let's break these verses down. In chapter 18, verse 9, knowing for certain that all is the self, the sage has no trace of thoughts such as I am this or I am not that. This verse points to the realization that everything is the self, leaving no room for identification with specific attributes or labels. There is only the self. Everything else is just an appearance. When you see beyond distinctions, thoughts of being something or not being something fall away. The mind ceases its habits of defining itself through opposites, and what remains is the simple awareness of existence. This is not a conceptual understanding, but a direct knowing. The sage has moved beyond mental constructs, resting in the certainty and knowledge of the self. Ashtavakra calls you to recognize and rest in the completeness of the self. When you stop identifying with passing thoughts and experiences, you see that nothing is separate from you. This understanding dissolves inner conflict, allowing for peace and stillness. In spiritual practice, letting go of the need to define yourself opens the way to freedom. Instead of struggling with self-image or doubt, you abide in the awareness that all is one, and you are that. 1810. The yogi who finds stillness is neither distracted nor focused. He knows neither pleasure nor pain. Ignorance dispelled, he is free of knowing. True stillness is not about concentration or suppression. It is the absence of disturbance. When awareness settles into its natural state, there is no pull towards distraction or effort to focus. Pleasure and pain lose their grip because they rely on identification. The yogi is not caught in the cycle of seeking and avoiding. With ignorance gone, there is no need to grasp for intellectual knowledge or concepts. The yogi resides as awareness. This verse invites you to experience a state beyond mental reach and sensory pull. The mind often swings between distraction and directed focus. But stillness is something else entirely. It is effortless presence. By recognizing this, your practice becomes less about trying to attain something and more about resting in what already is. Liberation is not about acquiring mental knowledge and direct experience and being free from the limits of mere mental knowledge. 1811. Heaven or poverty, gain or loss, society or solitude. In the yogi, free of conditioning, there is no difference. This verse speaks to the yogi's freedom from preferences and aversion. External circumstances do not touch the one who has gone beyond conditioning. Whether in abundance or lack, surrounded by others or alone, nothing adds or takes away from what is already whole. This is not indifference, but a deep knowledge that nothing alters the self. The play of opposites continue, but the yogi remains unmoved, untouched by any of it. If you look closely, much of your suffering comes from the mind's habit of labeling experiences as good or bad. This verse suggests that liberation is not about changing your circumstances, but about seeing through their apparent significance. When you no longer measure life in terms of gain and loss, a deep peace arises. Nothing needs to be different from how it is for you to be free. 1812. Religious merit, sensory pleasure, worldly prosperity, discrimination between this and that. These have no significance to the yogi, free of opposites, such as I do this and this I do not. This verse shows the freedom of the yogi from concepts of virtue, pleasure, and worldly achievements. The mind constantly evaluates experiences, categorizing them as good or bad, meaningful or meaningless. But for one who has transcended duality, none of these hold any weight. There is no longer any impulse to pursue or reject. Action happens, yet there is no sense of personal doership. The universe just unfolds as it will. Ashtavakra challenges you to examine how much value you place on achievements, pleasures, and moral judgments. In spiritual practice, attachment to these keeps you bound. When you let go of evaluating life in terms of right and wrong, success and failure, good and bad, you open yourself to profound simplicity. Actions continue, but the struggle around them disappears. Freedom is not in doing or not doing, it is in the absence of identification. These verses from the Ashtavakra Gita point to a freedom beyond identification, preference, and conditioned thoughts. When you recognize that all is the self, the struggle of defining, knowing, and choosing dissolves. True stillness is not effort, but the absence of resistance. The yogi who is free sees no difference between gain and loss, action and inaction. This is not passivity, but a profound resting in what already is. So now we have a video, Nome's discourse of the peace of the self.
Silent being is the nature of yourself. It is the only self there is. There are neither a multiplicity of selves outside of yourself, nor is there any multiplicity within your own existence. Silent being is itself liberation, which is one's natural state, which is entirely free from bondage that is only imagined. Clarity of knowledge regarding your own being is such liberation without a trace of bondage. It is happiness, the bliss of the self, without the possibility of suffering. In the immense, immeasurable silence of being, of Dakshinamurti, of Sri Bhagavan, there is no obstruction to bliss. there is no misidentification and no confusion regarding reality. In this silence, there is the certain knowledge that the reality alone ever is, and the unreal never is. That is, the one self alone exists, and there is never anything else. The Maharshi's peace and equanimity are always undisturbed. That peace and equanimity that are undisturbed are due to knowing bliss and bliss as oneself. Thus, complete detachment from the unreal. They are also due to knowing oneself. Hence, no confusion of the self with what is not the self. The same perfect transcendent detachment or equanimity is due to knowing what is real. Happiness, identity, and reality are truly one and the same. When you search for happiness, you search for yourself. Whenever the mind has the thought, such and such is real, this is so, I know this. That is to say, in the entirety of the mind's play in all its permutations of thought. There is the searching to know the reality, which is your own being. All the time, everywhere, one looks for oneself. Yet all the time and everywhere, you are yourself only, and nothing is missing. In the absence of knowledge of the self, the conception I appears. With I, there is this. With aham, there is idam. I and this. And between those two poles appear all the experiences of illusion. I and this, or we may say I and what is mine, my experience, my thoughts, my perceptions, my body, my world, and so forth and so on. The Maharshi has said, and it is also stated in an Upanishad, that bondage is characterized by the notions of I and mine. Ahankara, mamankara, I and mine. Absence of I and mine is liberation. From what is it liberation? It is liberation from all the imagined bondage. Because your real being, vast and silent, unborn, imperishable, is not an individualized entity, an embodied entity. And as for the mind part, the non-objective alone is real. What appears as if objective is not real. It is only a misperception of what is real. So then, in truth, as far as the I is concerned, no one has been born. And as far as this is concerned, the this aspect of one's experience, nothing has been created. For the unborn, there is no creation. All wisdom and all peace, therefore, depend on the knowledge of who you are. Suffering and bondage are constituted only of ignorance. Ignorance is composed only of misidentification, not knowing oneself. If the self is known, there is nothing else to be known. Reality then comprehends itself. What is realized then is existing all along, for the real ever is, and the unreal never is. Therefore, inquire, just as the Maharshi has directed, as to who am I within yourself. Abandon any misidentification with what is regarded in illusion as I and mine. That is, abandon the false identification of yourself with the body, with your senses, with any kind of thought constituting the mind. Indeed, even with the very notion of I, the assumption of existing as an individual entity. When you abandon such, you're only giving up imagination. The knowledge of the self does not give you a different nature than you had before. It simply reveals what is the case. And what is truly the case is that your very being, the only being that you have, is in nature the Absolute, Brahman, the one undifferentiated, unborn, imperishable, real self, that is not divided as among many, for we are not bodies, and is not divided in itself, for you are not the mind. To determine for your own experience how what is being indicated this morning is the truth about you, dive within yourself. Inquire, who am I?
And now we'll take some time to look within ourselves at our existence and being. You exist. Notice that you exist, and you know that you exist. Then inquire, investigate within yourself. What shifts in my identity when I see that all is the self? What is the experience of pure awareness without distraction or focus? How do my preferences shape my sense of self, shape my ego? What is action like when there's no sense of personal doership? Who am I? What do I take myself to be? And who am I really? What am I? Am I a body? Am I a mind? Am I the senses? Am I the consciousness? What is the nature of my existence? And we'll close with our chant. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om. Peace, peace, peace.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Well, I like listening to Ashtavakra instead of stories about Trump.
Absolutely. I was going to say we're ending a lot better than when we started.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so good.
And, you know, what Ramana continues to ask is that we know that we experience directly our own existence. And all of this other stuff is just mental noise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who are we when there is no noise?
Yeah. And the biggest noise is the first thought.
Yes, yes, indeed. It's all for me.
Yeah. And I think when we look out through the first thought, that's all noise. And that's what Ramana, his teaching is just to turn within
Mm-hmm.
to that silence.
Mm-hmm. You know, when we look out through the ego and mind, a metaphor Ramana used was we're looking out through a crystal. And if we see a flower, it looks like it's red. And if we see a leaf, it looks like it's green. But in no case has the crystal changed color.
Right. It's like before I came to Ramana's teachings, I was really into Ramakrishna. And
Mm-hmm.
Ramakrishna used to say, if you have a tub and you put your mind in the tub and the tub is blue, the mind becomes blue. If it's red, it becomes red.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So just pay attention to having
Mm-hmm.
that mind not in the red or the blue.
That's what Ramana says. It's not the appearance.
Right, right. Yeah,
You know, we live our lives as if the appearance is our reality.
yeah, yeah. And it's a passing show.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And Ramana wants us to just hold to what is not passing.
that's right.
You know, what is that?
Yeah.
So easy to say, so hard to realize.
But it's always there at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, the realizing it is just noticing what is already there. You know, it's funny about this. Anyway, see you next week, and maybe we will have some of your friends with us this time, Richard.
Okay, that'd be wonderful. And even if
Yes,
we don't, it's always wonderful.
right. It's yes. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you, Richard.